Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Wednesday, March 12th, 2025, and on Wednesdays we delve into emotional well-being and relationships. So for today's vlog, I thought I'd double down and expand upon what I was talking about on Monday's vlog, 2 days back. That vlog seemed to be relatively well received. And I was talking about the time that we've lived upon the planet, each of us, and how we might organize our daily routines to string together some meaningful minutes. I don't think I said anything particularly new or original. Instead, I was just sort of expressing my thoughts on what each of us might do to help ensure a life well lived, especially in light of our differences in talents and abilities and resources. And more importantly, based on the unique missions that we each have. For just as no two snowflakes are identical, neither are our lives and our unique missions. Yet I also mentioned that there's some common threads or general sorts of practices that we might want to consider to help ensure that we're living our best lives and that we aren't, quote unquote, wasting our energy, wasting our time. So basically, I was suggesting that every day we should do some productive work. We should attend to something or another in our households, that we should do some personal care stuff, and that we should exercise to help keep us physically and mentally healthy and so forth. Pretty standard stuff. In addition, though, I suggested too that every day we should spend at least a few minutes helping others, helping the planet. That we should do something creative, or literally create something. That we should spend some time praying and reflecting or expressing gratitude, as well as dreaming or imagining. But in all of that, there's a common thread. That is that the use of one's energy to positive effect. So, you know that this is something that you can do, that you have a certain amount of energy. And if you're inclined, you're typically more than willing to give of your time and energy for some positive effect, to do some good for the benefit not just of yourself, but of those around you and our world in general. I said something too about not being able to fathom living a mean-spirited, hateful, or hurtful life myself. And yet I noted that there were many folks out there who obviously do live their lives in that way, or who do exploit or harm others on a regular basis. And I suggested too that if you find yourself locked into a cycle of anger and of harm of others, of the planet, then that's genuinely a waste of our lives. Whereas every minute that we spend pursuing our life's mission and expending energy positively, well, this helps ensure that we're leading a successful and meaningful life. And that's the core theme, in my view, of the old Jewel song from back in 1998. She put out a song, Hands is the title, simply enough. And she sums up the whole philosophy of that song, I think, in one simple phrase towards the end of the song. And she sings, "In the end, only kindness matters." She repeats the phrase. And yet, kindness seems to be in retreat, or at least in short supply, especially among certain folks. And even worse, there are all too many political leaders and not a few religious leaders who are sowing seeds of hatred and anger, division and despair. And so here's my message today. Well, the first of my messages. Don't listen to them. And do not believe them, for they aim to exploit you and use you for their ends. And if they do that, they're derailing you from your ultimate mission, from your efforts to lead a healthy, productive, and meaningful life. So wait a minute, Dr. J. Who are you talking about? Who are these people? Can you name some names? I don't need to. You already know who these people are. Fill in the blanks with anyone that you're familiar with in your personal lives, in your professional lives, amongst the political and religious leaders that are out there, the influencers, anyone, but especially in the public sphere. But bottom line is you know who these people are because they're using their words mainly as weapons to put down others. Think of anyone who believes in bullying as a virtue, as something that's okay. Think of anyone who preaches hatred towards others, or who tends to dehumanize or demonize others. Think of any politician or preacher who writes off an entire group of people precisely because they come from this or that background or this or that part of the world. Don't let yourself get sucked into their narratives, into their webs of lies about humanity, about the human condition. Don't allow yourselves to be deceived by the haters of the world, or any, regardless of whatever their political or religious persuasion might be. Because all political parties or entities and all religious traditions and different denominations and different faiths the world over, believe it or not, have their share of haters, have their share who have turned away from the true mission of their own lives or of what the great faith or political traditions are intended to achieve. So how do you spot them? Again, you'll know them on the basis of what they project, what they give off. But don't be deceived either. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever identify and denounce the destructive actions of a specific individual or group that's acted in a particularly harmful way, and that we shouldn't hold people accountable for bad behavior. That's exactly what we should be doing. Again, at least in responding to these instances, these violations of law or of our normative structures that clearly threaten us, that threaten others around us, that threaten our communities. And we, in our heart of hearts, in our guts, we know what bad things look like and what they feel like and when they happen, okay? So I'm talking about, then, the people who are the leaders amongst us, again, especially in the public sphere, whose first instinct, then, is to not show kindness, whose rhetoric reveals that they are not inclined to be empathetic or compassionate towards others. I'm talking about people who start with the assumption that while they themselves personally think that they deserve recognition and understanding and perhaps even applause, they don't think of others as truly worthy of their respect or our collective respect or understanding. Even worse, I'm talking about those people who then double down on their bullying behavior, on their expressions of hatred towards others, who just don't look like or seem like them for whatever illogical and typically indefensible reason. Oh, don't get me wrong, they'll come up with reasons. But their reasons usually take one of 5 forms I've found over the years. They usually argue against a people's or a group of people or a type of person because they don't look like us, because they don't sound like us, because they don't believe what we believe, because they don't behave like us, and because we were here first, and so they don't belong. In fact, I honestly believe that the reason that so many people have a family rule at family gatherings, something along the lines of no talk about politics or religion. And it's precisely for this reason. That is, in other words, it's precisely because of the tendency for at least some people in most families to get sucked into one or more tribal vortexes, and things turned heated and often ugly and so on. They believe, they know that they are justified in hating whole categories of people. And they so readily and often smugly assert their superiority. And often they demonstrate or they reveal the core cruelty that's embedded in their thinking. And those opinions don't simply emerge out of thin air. Those folks have learned, or at least had their tribal hatreds reinforced by following or listening to certain people. Well, what people? Those who endorse the opposite of kindness, cruelty. So do you follow such people? Do you listen to people? Do you enjoy listening to such people? It's fairly easy to tell who they are. If you're following someone who takes pleasure in mocking other people, cheering at their misfortunes, then you're probably following the wrong person or the wrong kind of person. If you're following someone who claps and cheers at the pain and suffering that others endure, or who are indifferent to their pain and suffering, then you're following the wrong person. If you're following someone who suggests that it's only you and your kind that matters, or expresses some kind of xenophobia, you're following the wrong person. In essence, I'm talking about people then who start from the premise that they and their tribe are special, are righteous, are deserving of what they have, and while others do not deserve equal treatment, respect, or could be considered equally worthy of human dignity. And so, while we all have some degree of bias along these lines, and I've talked about this before, we are not, and this is the key point, we are not all equally cruel, or equally hateful, or equally dismissive of others, or equally unable to see the human dignity of the other. Some folks, and some specific political and religious leaders, are much worse in one or more or all of these regards. So here's how the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, put it in a commencement speech, where he talks about, maybe less charitably, the idiot in the room as being the person who's cruel. So here's the point that he wants to make, and I'll follow up in a moment.
The best way to spot an idiot: look for the person who is cruel. Let me explain. When we see someone who doesn't look like us, or sound like us, or act like us, or love like us, or live like us, the first thought that crosses almost everyone's brain is rooted in either fear or judgment, or both. That's evolution. We survived as a species by being suspicious of things that we aren't familiar with. In order to be kind, we have to shut down that animal instinct and force our brain to travel a different pathway. Empathy and compassion are evolved states of being. They require the mental capacity to step past our most primal urges. This may be a surprising assessment, because somewhere along the way in the last few years, our society has come to believe that weaponized cruelty is part of some well-thought-out master plan. Cruelty is seen by some as an adroit cudgel to gain power. Empathy and kindness are considered weak. Many important people look at the vulnerable only as rungs on a ladder to the top. I'm here to tell you that when someone's path through this world is marked with acts of cruelty, they have failed the first test of an advanced society. They never forced their animal brain to evolve past its first instinct. They never forged new mental pathways to overcome their own instinctual fears. And so, their thinking and problem solving will lack the imagination and creativity that the kindest people have in spades. Over my many years in politics and business, I have found one thing to be universally true. The kindest person in the room is often the smartest.
Wow. So I think there's a great deal of wisdom in those words. He's equating superior intelligence, think about this, with the ability to forge new mental pathways, the neurological linkages that allow humans to express much more than their purely animal instincts and the accompanying fears. So Pritzker argues that the smartest people in the room are the kindest people. Stated a bit differently, I've often found that the people who believe themselves to be intelligent can be remarkably cruel at times to others and in their thinking. If someone expresses hatred and cruelty, then they are indeed trapped in the animal portion of their brains. But even worse is that the aspiring king of the jungle hopes to get others to submit to their superiority, to their unique strength and toughness, that by rights should let them rule the jungle. And when we're talking about people expressing their ideas, they've come to believe that they are superior in their thinking as well. But again, from Pritzker's logic, from my own logic, if you're expressing cruelty in your thinking, you're not intelligent. Sure, you're using your evolutionary advantages, shall we say, but in a way that's destructive in nature. And those same people will often seek solace and comfort by trying to get others to side with them, but not just through physical force. Physical force is incredibly inefficient. Instead, what they need to do is to convince others to believe that their ideas are the correct ones, and more importantly, in evaluating other human beings, those others then are unworthy and undeserved of the same dignity, respect, and consideration. And by the way, just in case you think I'm somehow setting myself up as this enlightened being, right, who doesn't, fall into this kind of tribalism, let me reassure you that's decidedly not the case. I too sometimes fall into the same traps. For example, I might be watching someone that I generally tend to like, right, or follow, and yet then that person engages in mocking or disparaging behavior towards people that I disagree with. That's not entirely uncommon. We've seen that in many instances where we've, especially in comedy or in other spheres, where we think, okay, well, this is what somebody's doing, and I don't like this other person, so I can laugh along with them. Okay, well, I can tell you that sometimes I'll have that sort of almost visceral reaction, right? Especially if I'm feeling that the people like me that they're talking about have been bullied. And it's nice to see the bullies taken down a notch. So in other words, I sometimes find myself taking comfort in watching someone lapse into the mocking behaviors because they're mocking people who have mocked me. That's a vicious cycle. It's very difficult to break out of that. And so try as I might, I recognize that I too am guilty at times of some degree of tribalism. And here's the final point. It's in those moments that I realize I'm being sucked into a drama that's not of my own choosing and not of my own creation. It's a form of negative energy. It's not an emotionally healthy or adaptive response in the long term. I can feel myself, in fact, starting to turn away from my life's mission and the person I want to be. I can feel myself turning away from the light, the source of creation, the universal connectedness that binds us all together. But finally, that doesn't mean that I can't disagree with others, that I can't work towards effecting change in those areas where I feel like I can and I believe that I should be trying to make a difference. Here's the point. I just cannot do that from a position of cruelty or hatred. And I don't follow or support anyone who does operate from a position of cruelty or hatred. Even further, I've tried to reduce the time, if I can't eliminate it altogether, from following my kind and tribal leaders who do the same thing. It's far too easy, and it's a waste of time and energy. I'm not naive. I get it, Dr. J, but there are so many people out there who are that way and who are in positions of power. And they currently do operate from a perspective of cruelty and hatred. Indeed, that's almost certainly the case. And there are some people then who might be essentially unreachable. But that said, I believe that you and I and we can connect with the vast majority of people, regardless of our differences, regardless of our tribal affiliations. And so that's where I'm committed, or that's where I try to spend my finite time and positive energy. I'll certainly march with others in common cause, but only in a cause of affirmation. In other words, I'll only march where we are advocating love and kindness for a greater good, something beyond ourselves, and never in anger, but rather because we care about the other, even those with whom we disagree. And we want for a better world for ourselves and our kind, but equally for everyone else who doesn't fall into our tribal sphere, who doesn't belong directly in our community. That's where you'll find me marching. So if you want to change the world, and if you want to get me on board, then tell me your plans for making the world a better place for everyone. Not just people who look like me, who sound like me, who believe like me, who act like me, and who control certain parcels of land. My goodness, in just a few years, each of us will be returned to that very land that gave rise to our being in the first place. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So I'm going to spend my limited time on the planet in this particular form, I should say, not seeking special privileges and control over the land and resources just because I'm from this or that tribe. No one's going to remember me in just a few generations anyway. Instead, while I'm here, if I could, I'd rather solve the mystery of universal human kindness, which would make me the smartest person in the room, according to J.B. Pritzker. But that's not why I'm interested in that mystery. If I happen to be smarter today than yesterday, or smarter or wiser than anyone else, or in a given room, it's only going to be because, or byproduct, of the fact that I've learned, maybe at least compared to those, I've learned how to be the kindest person I can be. And I've still got a long way to go. Okay, so back to work. Meanwhile, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives and nurture love in your hearts, and show some kindness by giving someone a hug today, if you have a chance. Bye for now.